My wife Laura was away on a business trip, and I was struggling to manage all the household chores, so I asked my mother-in-law Mary if she could help me as I was having a hard time with it all, especially picking up my daughter Emily from school. Mary graciously agreed, and things seemed to be going well. One day I came home from work a little earlier than usual, and I had some free time on my hands. On my way home, I decided to stop by the store and buy a few things to show my appreciation. Some fruit, compote, and sweets. Mary had just brought Emily home from school when she noticed the table set and looked at her in surprise. "What's all this for?" she asked. "What's it for? It's just my way of saying thank you," I replied. As I sat there, a strange thought occurred to me. I knew myself well enough to know that I have a hard time when I go too long without female company. The week was my limit. So, all things considered, the thought of Mary didn't seem far-fetched to me. Why chase after someone else when she was there for me? Mary seemed a little nervous as she sat down at the table. After all, this was one of the first times we'd spent time together without Laura. After the compote, she seemed to relax a bit, her eyes shining as we chatted. I couldn't help but notice her figure. Although she wasn't my usual type, there was something intriguing about her. Catching my gaze, she shifted awkwardly in her seat. I began to ponder how I could make my intentions clear. Soon, Emily entered the kitchen and, interrupting the conversation, asked if she could go to her friend's house. And naturally, I agreed, and she hurried away, leaving Mary and me alone. She looked tense, as if she'd swallowed a stick, so I decided to broach the light topic of aging gracefully. "You know, Mary," I said, "it's true that young women are attractive, but mature beauty has something to say, too." I tried not to go too far, but I felt the moment had come. I leaned across the table and kissed her. To my surprise, she kissed me back, though she seemed to have a hard time believing what was happening. At that moment, we heard the door creak open, and Emily's voice came from the hallway. Mary quickly pulled away, her face flushed, and she asked if Emily had finished her homework before Emily left the room again. That evening, Laura called before bed to see how things were going. She told me that her business trip was being extended for another week. I pretended to be disappointed, but my mind was already spinning with thoughts of options. Another week meant more opportunities to enjoy a compote with Mary, though of course I didn't say that out loud. The next day Mary came in again looking somewhat flustered. She hadn't even had time to put on makeup, but there was something about her excitement that was hard to miss. As we spent more and more time together, I began to realize how easygoing and kind she could be. I used to think I had a certain type, slender, quiet women, but Mary was proving me wrong. She was full of warmth and had a vibrant energy that was both soothing and alluring. I enjoyed her company more and more, and the boundaries between us began to blur. Days turned into weeks, and soon Laura's return was approaching. Mary looked worried, and I assured her that we would still be able to see each other occasionally. She smiled, served herself some compote, and poured more, clearly wanting to savor the moment before our time together was over. We talked for hours that day, reminiscing about old times, talking about our lives, and just enjoying each other's presence. We seemed to be creating our own little world, separate from everything else. Laura came back sooner than I expected, and I didn't have time to prepare properly. She entered the apartment, and her gaze fell on the table, set 2 glasses, plates of sausage slices. "Did you have someone over?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, just an old friend who stopped by to talk about a new job," I lied, trying to sound casual. I did, just stared at her. She didn't continue, just nodded and went into the bathroom to wash her hands. I quickly rushed into the bedroom to clean up, my heart pounding. It seemed like everything around me had turned into chaos. Laura came into the bedroom a few minutes later, but by then I was already lying down, pretending to be half asleep from exhaustion. "Get some rest," she said softly, and left the room. I breathed a sigh of relief. Later, cleaning up the kitchen, I couldn't shake off the guilt, but I quickly pushed it away. I tried to convince myself that what Mary and I had was only a temporary escape that wouldn't affect my marriage in the long run. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. It was a week before I decided to visit Mary again. She looked worried, and her first question was if Laura suspected anything. I reassured her, and she visibly relaxed, inviting me into the living room. She smiled, and I couldn't deny myself the pleasure. Sometimes you have to enjoy life's moments, even if they are difficult. We sat down on the couch, and I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin. It was a quiet, intimate moment that made me realize how much I had come to care for her. "You know," Mary said quietly, "I never thought it would turn out like this. I always thought I was just here to help, nothing more." I looked at her and smiled. "Life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it?" She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "But what about Laura? I don't want to cause trouble." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "We'll be careful. I don't want to hurt anyone either." Mary sighed, leaning her head against my shoulder. I can't help how I feel." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her closer. "Me too. Let's just take it one day at a time." We sat in silence for a while, just enjoying each other's presence. The heaviness of what we were doing hung in the air. But in that moment, everything felt right. It was as if time had stopped and all that mattered was the two of us. The next few days passed like a whirlwind. Mary and I managed to find small gaps of time to see each other, even if only for a few minutes. A quick kiss in the hallway, a long touch when no one was looking. It was risky, but that made it all the more exciting. The secrecy of it all added another layer of arousal that was hard to resist. One night, Laura mentioned that she was planning to spend the weekend with friends. My heart raced at the thought of having more time alone with Mary. I tried to contain my excitement, nodding casually as Laura talked about her plans. Inside, however, I was already planning how to make the most of that time. When the weekend finally came, Mary arrived and we spent the day together. It was different this time. No rush, more relaxed. We cooked together, laughed, and talked about everything in the world. It felt like we had become a real couple, even if only for a little while. We danced in the living room, music playing softly in the background, and we hugged each other. On this day, all worries and complications faded away, and it was just the two of us. As the weekend came to an end, reality began to sink in again. Soon, Laura would be back, and we would have to go back to pretending. Mary looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of happiness and sadness. "I wish it could always be like this," she whispered. "Me too," I said, kissing her forehead, "but we'll find our moments. We always do." She smiled, and we spent the last few hours just holding each other, savoring every second before we had to part. It was bittersweet, but I knew that no matter what happened, we had those moments, and that was enough for now.